Christopher Luna, and he's from Printed Matter in Vancouver.
Thank you.
They come away. So.
Thank you. So Printed Matter Vancouver is a small press. We also do editing and manuscript review for Northwest authors. And Printed Matter Vancouver very much grew out of the Ghost Town Poetry Open Mic, which I started in 2004, and which I now co-host with my wife Toni, who is also the other half of Printed Matter Vancouver. And we have published 6 books so far, 2 anthologies from Ghost Town Poetry Open Mic, and 3 debut books of poetry by poets from somewhere in Southwest Washington, and we have all of those people here today. And our 6th book is Toni's most recent book called Driven by Hope. So you're going to hear a little bit from everybody who's been published by the press so far. And so I have a couple of poems in the Ghost Town anthology. The first Ghost Town anthology went from 2004, when the series started, to 2010, and that's because we started this press in 2011, so that's how far we'd gotten at that point. In the back of both of the anthologies are lists of the people who have read, so you can also get a little bit of that Northwest poetry history when you look at these books. And these books as well, the anthologies, are for sale today. So I'm going to read 2 short poems to start us off. These are both from my Ghost Town USA poems, which are fish out of water poems and observations about Vancouver, Washington, because I am originally from the East Coast. From Ghost Town USA, November 9, 2006. The dirt beneath Bonita's fingernails did not discourage him. She was reading a bilingual edition of Dante's Inferno on the 37, and that was more than enough. February 28, 2009. Upper middle class women and their mothers take Hummers to Safeway to pick up poinsettias and birthday cakes. You never know when you might encounter an Iraqi insurgent hiding in the dairy aisle, or a tweaker with a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. So, thank you. I snuck that into this book because it's probably my favorite one, my favorite Ghost Town USA. And for the writers there, both of those poems were the kind of poems where they sort of happened in real time, and I got them down as they happened, and that doesn't happen very often, so I had to put those in there. So the first of our Printed Matter Vancouver authors that we're going to hear from is our most recent, other than Toni, and that's Matthew Eiford-Schroder, originally from Camas, Washington. His book is called Consistently East, so please welcome Matthew.
So I was in one of Chris's poetry classes trying to recover from a brain injury that I got as a bouncer when I got punched in the head a lot in one evening. So this became like a way to recover, and the thing I started doing is remembering, I'm kind of a maniac, so I was remembering a trip I took where it's a car drive from London to Mongolia as a vehicle to kind of recover from the injury. And kind of the theme of today has been nature and narrative, so that's why I chose these 4 poems. 2 taking place in nature in Mongolia, and then 2 how I re-saw nature after that in the United States. So the first one is called Night Pooping on the Outskirts of the Gobi Desert. Canned ram meat has set a fuse. I can no longer hide from the high desert cold. Devoid of distraction, I am a man squatting over a hole in an emptiness. Required to see the absurdity of infinity contained in the sky, the crippling beauty of before, during, after of countless explosions at once. I am too small not to be enormous. I have trained my ankles and knees to function outside of modernity, and have finally found a position capable of cleaning the core of me without waste. I am connected to something too big to be practical. And then this, like a lot of maniac traveling writers, I grew up in a literary history, and this is kind of me learning to confront that in a small town in Mongolia. This is where I took horses up to go see a group of people called the Satsan, or the reindeer people, for a reading, and this is kind of where I realized I was an idiot. It's called The Death of the Wilderness. In a town too remote to sell condoms, they are celebrating LeBron James' victory in the finals. My new friend learned English from Marv Albert, he tells me, loudly. Our horse guide to the shaman people spent half the ride on a cell phone. In the place I chose to test myself against the elements, where I had planned to write my chapter of man versus nature, Every 6 hours, friendly herders gave me dried cheese. Where I planned to help, equipped with just where I was born, the man who helped me buy pants to keep me succumbing from the elements works in publishing. He downloaded a Mongolian English dictionary on the hotel Wi-Fi to tell me this. I am now aware of how little I have to offer. I procured fresh drinking water by first visiting the ATM. The unused water purification kit I had no intention of using in Europe will only remove sediment in me. Land misunderstood by me, never unused, always in someone's grocery store, daily commute, or playground. The expansionist delusions of my gunfighter nation have bored into the space where my dreams are born. As I scrape the racism from my reptile, I see the faces of individuals. At a teepee with a satellite dish on a stick by the Russian border, I have chased a myth to attrition. A justification of conquerors have starved in my mind. The world is not my ego treadmill. People live here. And then, so, kind of going with that, to get back to New York, I hooked up with a friend of mine who worked in the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota, and I kind of went out there to try and make enough money with him, so my New York landing was soft. And also my grandparents are part of the leaving the Dust Bowl and coming to Washington State, so that mythology has always held a lot in my mind. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to go to Mongolia, is I figured that's about as close to 1920 Dakota as I'm probably going to get in modern life. So this is called The Dream of Dakota. America is so big it can contain its own diaspora. I will return to the land of my grandparents. Deep underneath what the wind left of the upside-down sod, they found the heroine of movement. I will help with the harvest. In the harsh land that taught my grandma to make stew, taught my grandfather to work, less than 100 miles from a foreclosed farm that taught generations to fear debt, I want to feel my hands freeze, chasing the undistracted joy of a hard purpose. An attempt to be wedged into place by time as I work to pay for a comfortable landing in Brooklyn. When the car part arrives, I will depart with Mr. and Mrs. Pooper for the Bakken. And so, as we come up with narratives of nature and purity and ethics, we also omit a lot in terms of nation building, and this is a poem about the heritage marker signs all on my way to the Dakotas, and you can find them pretty much everywhere in the United States. It's called Heritage Marker. The dead must be tired of hearing how hard it was for their killers to get here, and how far they traveled to kill them, and how much furniture they had to leave on the prairie to take everything. Thank you.
We're so proud of these authors, and there's so many great things about each of their books. One of the things I like about the next book that you're going to hear some from is that there are photographs included in the book. And our next author is Tiffany Burba, who wrote Meet Me Where I Left You.
Thank you. This is my book. It's all New York poems or inspired by my visits to New York with a little bit of the Northwest thrown in. So this first poem is called Welcome Home. The pilot comes on the speaker and says, in just a few moments, you will be able to see Manhattan on the right side of the plane. For those of you on the left, maybe next time get a seat on the right. I didn't pick which side of the plane I was seated on, just took the cheapest option, as a flight doesn't matter as much as just getting there. Even from high above the concrete streets, my city calls to me. I see the people on the other side of the plane trying to catch the views, wishing they could see how beautiful the city looks just below the clouds. New York is the same but different as it stands, its arms wide open to welcome me back once again. I nod as the city winks, and we both know I will once again leave here changed. So I had written a series of poems called Meet Me Where I Left You. There's probably about 6 or 7 in the book, so this is one I actually wrote for New York. Meet me as fall has just started to change the leaves in Central Park, where the green transforms to orange and yellow as the air is crisp in the morning, warm in the afternoon, and chilly at night. Meet me as I welcome play to bask in your ambiance, where he and I grow in our love for one another. back in my brother's place in Woodside, where I first envisioned the life I would make in this city. Meet me on your street where I let my feet soak up your grime and let your museums feed my artistic desires, where I spend time with my family eating Korean barbecue in Flushings and pierogies in Greenpoint. Meet me as I take a ride from Roosevelt Island to Manhattan, making a brief stop at the Museum of Sex, at the rooftop bar where my sister and I sit, laugh, and drink overpriced cocktails. Meet me and my brother on your street corners where we eat hot dogs from street vendors before attending Shabbat service, where I take in all the rituals of this Jewish tradition. Meet me as I travel down 30th Avenue, where I stop for cannolis and chocolate-covered strawberries, and watch Logan and Lucas devour the Italian treats, as Lily enjoys a giant strawberry. Meet me where I plan to make my life, as I fall deeper in love with you, as you restore any brokenness that my heart still clings to, where I pursue fantasies and live without regrets. Meet me back in that moment that love finally found the space New York opened in my heart. So, when you go to New York, you have to come home. So this is my poem called Coming Home. It rained the morning I left. Even this tough place sheds tears when I leave. I did all my crying the previous 2 days. Knew it was coming. Could feel the sadness, as leaving is always the hardest. I grow quiet in the days after my birthday. So many visions, so many thoughts, rest on surfaces of empty whiskey glasses. Sisters are hard, their love and protection leave thorns on my tongue, making it hard to speak. Brothers are kind, support the openness of a life lived without regrets. Friends love and enjoy, embrace and cheer, remind me that I'm rare and worthy of love. My hometown welcomes me. Tears and rain wash city grime, damaged hearts, and fulfilled fantasies. The Northwest knows it's losing the battle, so it flashes sunlight through gray clouds. This is to remind me I belong here too. So when we started putting this book together, all the poems were already written, so there was 2 additional poems that I wrote. One was the Meet Me where I left you for New York, and this last one that's called I Was Loved. I dreamt last night that I was loved, far beyond anything tangible. Last night I dreamt so hard, as if I could carry it through to waking. As my eyes open, I try to keep them shut, keep them open in that moment before I feel the rush of loneliness that always shows up unwelcomed at my door. Last night I dreamt that you were beside me. After we made love and sweet rhythmic response to our heartbeats, my hand drifts over to feel flat, cold sheets. No trace that you have ever been there, or ever will be. Last night I slept in Astoria, woke to the bright sun of a New York fall morning. Last night I dreamt of New York, as I reached over to feel the skin of a new lover, feel his platinum wedding band, and realize he has always been my dream, the one my mind was unable to realize in a conscious state. Last night I dreamt I was loved, and I was. Thank you.
I realized I was a tiny bit imprecise when I introduced Tiffany. The really beautiful black and white photographs of New York that are in the book are Tiffany's photographs. She's a very talented photographer. So all the books you're hearing from during this showcase are at the book fair. So step over there afterwards and check them out. And the first person that we published a debut volume of poetry from, and I really it was very selfish for me. I wanted to be able to say I was the first person to publish her, was Jenney Pauer's Serenity in the Brutal Garden. So here's Jenney Pauer.
Since this is a celebration of nature, the first poem is about this woman who introduced me to nature. I lived in a kind of a low-income housing apartment complex, and she created this garden that I guess opened up a new world for me. So her name is Mrs. Donahue. Mrs. Donahue held a snapdragon out to me, pressed its jaws between her arthritic fingers, and made it roar. She coaxed a bead of nectar from the throat of a honeysuckle and placed it squarely on my tongue so I could learn to savor the unexpected sweetness of hidden things. One morning, Sherry and I, holding hands on our way to the bus stop, looked up at Mrs. Donahue's balcony at the exact moment she was submerged beneath a waterfall of red cardinals who, with cries of ecstatic relief, fell onto her shoulders, shrieked their troubles in her ears, fed from the cups of her hands and the pockets of her bathrobe. In our neighborhood, she liked the girls because we were quiet and orchid petals soft, because we were enraptured by the first blush of a rose, because we were reverent before the stern instruction of yellow daffodils. We turned our love outward and pressed our faces close to the scent of jasmine and magnolias. But she hated the boys in the parking lot because they were cruel and blindly aggressive, because their language was as brutal as their games, because they turned their hatred outward and stripped her flowers from their stalks and threw their corpses next to the cigarette butts and broken glass. My mother admired the battle that Mrs. Donahue fought. She would make her egg rolls and kimbap, wrap the brittle skin of seaweed around, caked with salt around pliable mounds of sticky white rice. We carried them in plastic bags up 3 flights of stairs, shyly exchanged them for a bunch of carnations, a dusting of seeds, an adulthood's garden of memories, Eden. So I taught for 3 years. I teach English at the border of Mexico and Arizona. And my favorite person in the world there was the father of one of the teachers, and he was a migrant farm worker. And so this is a poem dedicated to him. Reuben. He had fat hands with fingers that looked like overstuffed cigars, and he would dangle them like a rattle in front of his granddaughter's incredulous eyes and pretend his fingers were as lithe as ballet dancers, as nimble as circus knives. At scary movies, his wife would only grab onto 2 of his fingers because holding the whole hand felt excessive. His grown son would laugh at how store-bought gloves would never fit him, how they had to cut holes in a pair of socks and make his fingers go naked. He knew that his hands were not the stuff of romance novels. They were too thick and jolly, most certainly the hands of a peasant, not of a king. But he was grateful for them and proud. He remembered how they bled that first time in the fields, when he had cut through rows of cauliflower with a knife, then tossed the knife aside and dug through the soil barehanded. He remembered how his hands felt as they turned to leather beneath the sun, how the calluses appeared without warning, and how the soft planes of his hands turned to sand. And he remembered how they remained steady the first time a farm owner tried to cheat him, certain that his undocumented status meant that he could somehow be made to feel that he was less than a man. He remembered how these hands managed to speak for him when his voice failed him, the first time he held his wife by the waist and she felt them tremble as if the bones had broken loose and scattered from the sheer panic of his unexpressed desire. He remembered how he could fit each of his children as infants into one hand, how their small bodies looked as perfect as a single berry in a cup. He remembered how a neighbor's dog had tried to attack his youngest daughter, and how he'd used his hands, first as a hammer and then as a shield, and how the dog's teeth had left a scar that looked like an apologetic smile. He remembered how he had broken his left hand when he slammed it against the wall when his 15-year-old son died from a long illness they couldn't afford to cure. And he remembered how he still carried his son's casket with his ruined hand, and how after the funeral his wife cradled it in hers, kissed it, and cried. Even now, he marveled at their strength and versatility, how their ungainly mass, pressed lightly against the small of his grandchild's back, could guard against the attack of dark and angry dreams, how they could still perform delicate feats of love, such as preventing a balloon from escaping by tying a knot at the end of a string or finding an errant button in the lining of his wife's coat. He would turn them over and examine the network of lines across the palms and wonder if his history were truly written there, and if so, could he learn to read the map of his future better so he could finally lead his family to the life they deserved. Then he would allow his fingers to overlap so they resembled the planks of a bridge, and he would wait for answers to fall like a flock of exhausted sparrows, or to drift like survivors from a flood. He would wait patiently as they heaved their bodies upward, and would bless them as they clung, as they rested in the shelter of his calm and heavy hands.
So Printed Matter Vancouver's most recent book is the third book from Printed Matter Vancouver's co-founder, Toni Lumbrazo Luna, and it's very exciting for those of us who like Toni's poetry because I think it's been about 10 years since the last book, so please say hello to my co-founder of Printed Matter Vancouver and my wife, Toni Lumbrazo Luna.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. This has been a great day, and it's a privilege for me to have worked with these poets. It's an honor every day, and I'm really pleased to be here with all of you. So I wanted to start out by just reading a few things from, this was my second book. It's really beat up, I noticed. So anyway, and it's called Wind Wing. This is called Screenplay. I can write about anything but you. It's always too early or too late to incarcerate my senses, uncoil thoughts into words drawn from the infinite vat of language. Can I forgive that melodrama before you? When I lived around the corner from despair. This time, despair is the invisible man, and you are Bogey, Tracy, or James Dean, and I write about them until I can write about you. It matters to notice these things. Two enormous crows mate in the sycamore out front, silently, shiny black wings extended. It's 1 o'clock on a Tuesday, warmest day since winter thaw, first day without socks. I want to be the crow, eat worms and gum wrappers and mate without privacy on the front lawn. Before I get back into the street, they've finished. Lean together on the branch, first spring foliage provides little seclusion, and they could care less about these things. Just off the curb, I sit, stare, watch to see if intimacy exists between them, between crows. Humans are love scavengers, crows of emotion. We skim the surface, peck our way through the top layer of romance, unable to mine riches of the heart, with tools dulled by hurt and a hard outer shell. I think about intimacy a lot these days, too much. I notice when couples don't touch, wonder how love can possibly endure in this world. The biggest crow hops a branch, slow glide to center yard, caw, stares me down. I want to be the crow. Let him have my life, pay bills, and feel the weight of all this nonsense. Imagine me cawing at the neighbors, shiny black wings extended under afternoon sun. And I wrote this poem called Wind Wing for my mother, who had an Impala convertible, just like this. Wind Wing. Sweet breeze, scented with orange blossoms in early summer, caress my face, pressed against the open wind wing in her Impala. These rides a secret time to talk while we forget she is crazy. Top down, headed home with drippy cones, her strawberry, me maple nut. Just enough time to adjust the wind wing while the red leather seats grow warm. She lets me push buttons to find the right song for our sing-along. These are the times I remember now. In melancholy middle age, her hair cut short, dyed blonde, shoulders tanned above the halter top, while shorts sprout bare legs down to bright red toenails. I picture this as her departure from upstate New York and Catholic school rules, when California set her free, then took her down. I watched her ricochet between two worlds, safe home or padded room, delicacies or dry-mouthed delirium, green lawns or barred doors, Sunday mass or shock treatments. Her sanity barely or not at all. I long for the Impala. It is so much easier than longing for her. A drive along Victoria Avenue, lined with orange groves and old songs, while we drift between dark nights and darker days. Her life, like the wind wing, unlatched slowly, 1 inch at a time, till the wind arrives at high pitch, throw it wide open, and watch everything fly away. I'm going to read the title poem from my newest book. This is called Driven by Hope. Driven by Hope. This is for my clients at the ARC in Santa Ana, California, and for those who are lost and longing to come home. Some people claim a second chance and escape from extremes on swings suspended from chains in unfamiliar playgrounds. At one time or another, he had a family, a parent, a brother, phone numbers written in ink on the palm of his hand, thanks strangers for spare change to make the call. Can I come home, Mom? Just for tonight. Someone stole my stuff when I got popped and it's cold out. The family's been here before. It never goes well. Their hope is habit forming. He looks like hell, smells foul, wants a smoke, coughs the 10-mile marker's home, yells, "Coffee!" when he enters the house. Mom's cooked a grilled cheese sandwich, trim crust timed perfectly brown. He slumps in the saved seat. She takes the cup with David painted on the side in red block letters, pours it full, adds 4 sugars to half and half. Won't look in her eyes, knows she's been crying. Soon she'll ask when he last slept, and he will lie. She will believe anything he says because her hope is habit forming. Won't eat the sandwich, can't eat anything, his stomach burns all the time. She's made up his bed, offered towels, vitamins. He spends an hour in the bathroom, lets the shower run while he sits on the floor, smoking. Imagines how water will sting if it touches his body. When the house is quiet, he goes to his room, waits for her to peek in, make sure he's in bed, knows she'll blow a kiss. It fractures his already broken heart. He waits another half hour, moves to the couch, then to the floor, hasn't been able to sleep on anything soft in years. At 4, takes his brother's new parka from the closet, pockets the jar of change from the hall table, steals a check from her purse, and writes, "I really can't be here. I love you. I'll call." He's out the door and into the darkness. Mother watches from her upstairs bedroom, glad tonight that her room faces the street. This is the moment she fears. Could be the last time. She always thinks this morbid thought when he goes. He crosses the lawn, moves out from beneath the street light, slips behind the neighbor's lilac tree, sees her in the window. This could be the last time. He always thinks this morbid thought when he leaves. He wonders why hope is habit forming, wonders what happened to him, wants to hope for something else. So he hopes she'll be able to sleep. He hopes she'll be able to sleep. He hopes. He hopes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming to the Printed Matter Vancouver showcase, and all the books that you heard from are for sale at the book fair.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. All right, so I'd like to introduce Phoebe Boucher, and she's from the Raven Chronicle Poets.
I have a couple changes.